to this Thursday edition of the Art Lewis Show. Nice to have you with us. Later on, after the 10 o'clock news this morning, we welcome Deacon Larry from the Saginaw Diocese to talk about a march coming up for migrants and refugees, as well as the Misa Hispania, which is the Hispanic Mass coming up. 11 o'clock on Focus. No guest today. We'll probably just have open phones for you then. But for this hour, we spend time finding out what's happening in Lansing, and we do that with State Representative Matthew Bierlein. Good morning, Representative Bierlein.
Good morning, Art. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You must be driving to Lansing or someplace.
I am. I'm sorry for the feedback. I thought I had my headphones, which are a little better, and I don't, so I've got to do the over the car.
All right. Well, so you're heading back to Lansing, where there is now in place a state budget. What's the good news and the bad news?
The good news is it's very bipartisan. I had, over 90 votes to pass the budget. Actually, it might have been over 100 votes to pass the budget, which was, that means there's probably a lot of halfway happy or halfway unhappy people. A little bit of everything for someone to like or dislike. I think the good things in the budget, it is smaller than it was last year. I think there's a recognition that state needs to get its fiscal house in order. There's some uncertainty with how much money will be coming in the future from the federal government, and we need to prepare for that. So one of the things that we were able to do to really drive some of the numbers down from individual departments is, we approve a lot of positions within those departments to be filled and paid every year. And we just have multiple positions that it's not a snapshot in time where those positions are unfilled, but it's year after year we're not filling these roles. And so we made the decision we're not going to fund roles that we really either aren't able to fill or have no intention of filling and seem to be functioning fine without. So we eliminated over 2,000 of those and put that money into other areas in the state, whether it was roads or schools. We were able to redirect out of that money. I think that was a good thing. We really did a lot with transparency and how funding is requested for individual members of districts. We call it legislative directed spending initiatives, LDSIs. In the past, that's been a very private, almost kind of secretive process. And this year we changed that. Every one of those spending initiatives actually had public testimony, and it was made available on a website that what legislators were asking for their districts. And I think that's a really good step forward in the transparency process. People want to know what we're doing and how we're spending money, and that's always a big secretive piece. You could call it, this work spending or this individualized district money, and we really made that transparent this year. And so I think those were some key highlights that are good things, but it's still $80 billion, and it's a lot to unpack.
Let me ask about that, Matthew, because it's an $80 billion plus budget. It wasn't too many years ago. Budget was only like 56 million. Has the state tax base gone up that much, and from where?
So my first year working for the state, I was a staffer before with 2019, and I think the budget that year was 63 or 64 billion, and the year before that it was maybe less than 60, maybe 59.
Yeah.
And a couple years ago it was even higher because there was a ton of federal COVID dollars that were one-time dollars, and a lot of that increase still comes from federal dollars coming into the budget. There are a lot of federal dollars that come in, whether it be for Medicaid or roads or education. There are a lot of federal dollars. So that's a big part of the increase. The other part is quite frankly, as expenses have gone up, we did see some increases in wages kind of from 20 to 22, 23 in that area. But a lot of it's sales tax revenue. As things cost more money, we generate more revenue on sales tax. And so a lot of the revenue pieces have been there. It hasn't, we didn't increase from the 4.25% for the state income tax. There was the 1 year that it went down. We think it should have been permanently down, but we lost that argument with the Attorney General's office. But our tax rate has stayed our tax rate is flat. So the new revenue the increases in revenue from just 6-7 years ago are really sales tax and federal dollars.
So we look at this budget, and it has to be by law balanced. But there was a lot of moving of money within the puzzle. Road funding, gas tax. How did it all wash out, and are you happy with the way it washed out?
Yes and no. I think most people assume that when they buy gas, all the taxes that they pay at the pump goes to the roads, because for years that's what they've been told is your gas tax is what fixes the roads. A lot of folks didn't understand that we had sales tax on top of our gasoline price. And so, if it's over $3 a gallon, there was that 18 cents that was sales tax. Well, sales tax doesn't get spent on roads. It has a different formula. It goes to local units of government. Some of it goes to schools.
Proposition A. Proposition A was Yep.
And so we made the decision earlier this year when we were working on what a roads plan looked like. We were trying to find a way to get to $3 billion. We wound up at, I think, 1.8. But we eliminated sales tax on gasoline, but we didn't eliminate that amount. We just added it back in as gas tax. So gas tax went up 20 cents, but we eliminated sales tax from all gasoline. So now every penny that's spent at the pump goes to our road funding.
And a lot of that's going to go to local rather than just the national, the federal and state highways.
Yeah, so we operate our road funding on Act 51, and the money goes to the state, and then it goes to counties, and then it goes to cities, and then counties are also supposed to work with townships to fix township roads as well. Right. And there's some match money there from the township. The new funding mechanism doesn't send any of that new money to the state. It directs it to the local units of government. We've talked about this before. It's that driveway to highway mileage that seems to be in the worst shape that we really wanted to invest in.
Yeah.
What that did, though, was it left a gap. If we eliminated that 18 cents that was, or 20-ish cents that was going to local units of government and schools, that leaves a hole in those budgets. And so we backfilled all of the school revenue. So schools, we took out of the general fund. We made sure that schools were funded, but we did not replace that local unit of government revenue. So our counties, cities, and townships get revenue sharing from the state, and it comes from sales tax and the general fund. And we give them revenue sharing because we don't allow them to charge their own sales tax. Townships and cities get two types of revenue sharing. They get both constitutional revenue sharing, and that's that percentage of the sales tax, and then they get statutorial revenue sharing, which is money that the state gives them because we expect them to do some state duties. Counties only get the statutory side of that, so they don't have any guaranteed revenue sharing. But we give them some every year because a lot of what county government does is dictated by the state. So if we don't pay them to do that, and we actually have unfunded mandate laws that say if we don't pay them to do it, they don't have to do it.
Right.
So we kept that statutory revenue sharing at the same rate that it was last year, but for those villages, cities, townships that get the constitutional revenue sharing, we didn't backfill those lost sales tax dollars. So they actually took a cut in their revenue sharing. Now, they should all be getting more money in this roads funding. So, and there's not a required match with the new dollars. So hopefully they're able to redirect that road funding and fill some holes, as well as a lot of communities are going to get this these new public safety trust fund dollars that'll help, but they can't offset other expenses with those.
Yeah,
so it's complex, and as a local government guy, somebody that came from local government, I wish we would have backfilled those dollars. I think it's important.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we have priorities.
All right, hang on. I got to take a break, and we'll come back. We're talking to State Representative Matthew Bierlein. One note for you: due to a water main break, the water will be shut off immediately to all of Adams Road in Thomas Township for 6 to 8 hours. They thank you for your patience, and that is from the Thomas Township Department of Public Works. All of Adams Road, the water is temporarily shut off while they fix the water main break.
Pat's Food Center in Freeland has a front.
And I told them spend time in their library, right? Like, if you can read well, you can teach yourself how to do anything, and no one can ever stop you from learning. And I think we've lost that along the way. We did pass some legislation. I can't remember this last year or the year before, that requires every school district now to have someone that's trained in the dyslexia training for students. But it's really phonics training. It's back to the basics of how you and I both learned how to read.
Yeah.
Sounding words out through phonics, and every school is trying to invest in that right now and get back to that. And I think that's going to be really helpful.
Here's
every year it gets harder and harder to learn if you're struggling with reading.
Yeah, but here's what you're up against. Now, I agree with you. Libraries are the place. The world's knowledge is contained in the libraries and their books. But today, and this is true for adults as well as kids, you want to learn how to do something, what do? You go sit down at
YouTube video.
Yeah, you go to YouTube. Exactly. And I'm afraid that this younger generation isn't going to know how to do anything but punch a computer button. You there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think that is certainly a struggle, right? It's something that we struggle with. I have kids, and we struggle with that. My kids don't. They don't want to read. We make them read because we know how important it is. I think there's those fundamentals that we still need to do hands-on. And we can't just ask ChatGPT what the answer is. And those are certainly things that are crucial. But it's not just knowing how to do it. It's learning how to think through it. It's that critical thinking aspect. And, I had a career in manufacturing before any of this. And when I was learning how to do drafting, AutoCAD was already out there. But our teachers made us learn on paper first. You got to have the fundamentals.
Yep.
You have to know how it's working. You can, draw on the computer all day, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're never going to get the right answer.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to something else. Since the Flint water crisis, infrastructure has come to the forefront in the state of Michigan. And heaven knows it's antiquated in many places. It's old. How are we doing in bringing our infrastructure up to date? And that includes, we just talked about YouTube. That includes broadband because that now is part of infrastructure. Where are we with all this?
I think it's it's constantly being worked on. And it is a kind of a scary proposition if most people knew how old our infrastructure was. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in the next decade to update things, and it's going to be very expensive. So as we're talking about, road funding and how we've had to boost that up to try and keep up and get things back on track. Our water infrastructure, our electrical grid infrastructure, and even, the early internet infrastructure is all outdated. And we've seen a big investment in broadband, and they're trying to expand that into new areas, but it's still lagging behind. I have satellite internet where I live. We just had, I think just within the last year, have actually had a internet cable run down the road that I live on. And there's places like that all over the state that there's just not a lot of people that live on the road, and so their options for reliable and fast internet are not that great. So we're going to have to continue investing in that. The water infrastructure is the piece that I think is going to be really crucial that we manage well. Water treatment facilities, most of our infrastructure is anywhere from 100 to 50 years old. Huge expansions in the 50s. There's a lot of things that are, at that 75-year mark that they've limped along, or they've made little fixes to try and keep up with. But we have city water systems throughout the entire nation that are getting waivers because they don't actually meet any of the new EPA standards. And so I don't know how long that will continue, maybe through this presidential administration, but probably not the next. And then they're going to have to really do a lot of work. How are we getting rid of our waste? We used to spread it on fields, and now they're saying because of PFAS we can't do it, or the farmers won't take it because they're concerned the EPA might come back later and say, oh, you have PFAS in this field, you can't grow crops. So I think there's all these big questions that we really need places like our MSU research facilities to figure out what we're going to do with some of this waste and see how to properly upgrade these water systems moving forward.
All right, Matt, can you hang on?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Take a break and be back. We're talking to 97th State Representative Matthew Beerline.
At Saginaw Township Community
And we continue on the Art Lewis Show, talking to 97th District State Representative Matthew Beerline. We're all sitting here in the middle of a government shutdown. This is like the 23rd day or something like that. What kind of impact do you expect it to have on Michigan?
I think it's kind of hard to say right now. I asked my staff when I was leaving the office last night, because I figured you were going to ask about that. Then how many phone calls have we received about the government shutdown in D.C.? And they both right away said, we actually haven't received any. The only people we've heard from are both, I represent, my district is in 2 different congressional delegations, and both of those offices have reached out to us saying, hey, if you guys are getting any calls or people have any concerns, we're still working, direct them to us. So at the base level, I don't think people have been very impacted yet. The longer this goes, depending on what doesn't happen, whether, Medicare payments don't go out to hospitals and physicians, Social Security payments aren't going out, then we start to see a bigger impact. And then at some point, I would think that large-scale construction starts to get held up just because of a lack of permitting process through the EPA. Hopefully they get their ducks in a row here pretty quick, and then we don't really ever see those impacts.
Yeah, I have to be honest, I don't think it'll impact Social Security because it's sort of mandated, and they don't want to mess around with it. But lots of other things can be hurt by it, and this one's been a long one. And, you're right. When people start to feel it in their pocketbook, then all of a sudden the calls will start to come. Pretty much the way things are most of the time, isn't it?
It certainly is. And it seems we just had, my kids go to school in Frankenmuth, and both the private school and the public school last week were both in Washington, D.C. for their 8th grade school trips. And, they had to really rework those trips out from the normal things that they do because the Smithsonian's are all closed.
Yep.
There were things they couldn't see, and those they're unfortunate impacts, but they're not nationwide impacts. They're not pocketbook impacts. It's disappointing for those kids for sure, and I hope they get a chance to see those things someday because they're really great pieces of our American history. But yeah, it's been kind of a weird. We hear about it in the media every day, but we really aren't hearing about it in our office, and that was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, well, at least you don't have to hear about it at the state level. You did pass a budget. Everybody was wondering if that was going to happen. So that was another long, drawn-out process. Do you think it'll get any better next year?
I do. I do think we'll do it quicker next year. I think there's a recognition that it's going to be a similar process with Republicans wanting to find ways that we can slow down growth, if not cut some things that we think could be better spent in other areas. And I think those negotiations start happening a lot sooner so that we don't wind up, a week into October before we pass the budget.
Yeah. All right, hang on. I'll get you for one more segment, and then we'll let you go. Matthew Bierlein, State Representative in the 97th District, and we will be back with him in just a moment. Let me talk about Quick Lane Freeland at McDonald Ford. Quick Lane Freeland is a place for your tires at just $5 over cost for all tires. And if you're asking, is there a difference between winter tires and regular tires that you use all year? Well, the answer is yes. And to find out more about it, we've asked John from Quick Lane to give us the inside scoop.
Hello, Art. Yes, winter tires are made with a pliable rubber compound that includes silica to stay flexible and maintain grip in freezing temperatures. Unlike harder all-season tires, which stiffen and lose traction in the cold, this flexible compound allows the tire to better conform to the road's surface, providing superior grip and traction on snow and ice to keep you safe.
All right, John, thanks. It's John from Quick Lane Freeland. Don't forget, all tires are just $5 over cost. Have your tires checked, and while you're there, have your cooling system checked. Now, let me tell you about something else going on at McDonald Ford today. This Thursday, October 23rd, tonight from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., they're going to have a trunk or treat event at McDonald Ford. There'll be candy and games and interactive trunks, food by big, meaty fillies. There'll be bounce house, obstacle course, fun for the entire family, and it's free. Trunk or treat at McDonald Ford tonight from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Stop on out. You'll be glad you did.
Great Lakes Bay Job Fair is back.
And mandates from government, whatever the level is. We have a really robust oversight committee this term, and we've been looking into a lot of what we consider to be, misuse of state resources or just downright abuse of state resources, and trying to find ways to do better with that. But, when we sit down, Art, and talk about, well, do we need this regulation? Like, that just seems kind of silly. But typically the people who fight the hardest to keep the regulation are the folks who have to adhere to it. Because a lot of times those regulations that the state mandates almost become protectionist. They keep other people from doing a thing. And so the folks who are already have the license or are adhering to the rules want to keep the rules so that they have that level of protection from the state from other people doing the same thing. It gets frustrating when we want to get rid of why do you have to be licensed to do a certain thing? But it's really hard to fight those things.
One of the issues we hear about, though, is from time to time you hear how difficult it is sometimes to deal with this state if you're a small business trying to get a business license. Liquor license, particularly liquor control, has always been an issue. Are we making any progress smoothing that out so it's easier to get the permits you need?
Yeah, that's one of those ones that is really hard to make changes in. You know, as we've talked about, just within my caucus, we've talked about the numbers, and we restrict the number of liquor licenses available based on population and things of that nature, instead of letting the free market kind of determine who has one and who could best provide the service. And so what happens is those licenses actually become really valuable. And once a business owns a license, they can then sell that license to another business, instead of, if you have the license and then you get out of the business, it goes back to the state and then somebody else can get the license. And so it actually becomes an asset. And so the people who don't want to see us change that licensing process are the people who already own a license, not because they don't want the competition of maybe another store being able to sell those products near them, but because it dilutes the value of that asset that they had to make a big investment in. And so it's the whole system needs an overhaul, and that's when it gets really hard, is when you have to change the whole thing. If you could chip away at pieces, it makes it a lot easier. But when the folks you're trying to help don't want you to change it, and I understand why they don't, because they really have a big investment in it. It makes it difficult to make those changes.
The other industry that has been talked about because of the 24% wholesale tax is the cannabis marijuana industry in the state. And you keep hearing two versions of what it may bring. Some say it's going to increase the black market because of the 24% tax. Others say it's going to thin the herd because the cannabis industry is overbuilt in the state. What do you think?
Probably a little bit of both. I'm sure that there will be some folks who want to go back to a black market system, or who are already growing more than the plant allotment they're allowed to have under the act, or under the constitutional amendment, because it was a ballot proposal. And it probably will thin the herd some. I think the prices in this state have gone down drastically because it is very saturated. I think the black market thing is interesting, though, because it's kind of a new concept. We've always had a black market for that product.
Sure.
But with the full legalization, you can grow your own. You can have up to a certain amount of plants. One of the things we've been hearing a lot from people in the industry is the folks who do violate the rules, because the fines and the fees and things for that are so low that, an example, you're allowed to grow 12 plants. If you have 13, it's a $500 fine. Well, if you have 13,000, it's a $500 fine.
Uh-huh.
And so they've wanted to make some changes there. If we think that this is going to push people into a black market, it very well could. The change now is, though, it's not a $500 fine. We haven't had to change the law on that to increase penalties for people. It's now tax evasion. And those are real. Those are a different level of crime, and it's how a lot of the bootleggers and the mafia was broke up, in the 30s.
Yeah.
What Al Capone went to prison for. And so I think it adds a new aspect to this. If you think you're going to go in the black market and get slapped on the wrist with a $500 fine, that's very different from the grower who's now maybe he's going to do some federal time for tax evasion.
Yeah. All right, Matthew, listen, time says we got to end, but thanks for spending it with us this morning. We'll do it again in the near future.
Well, I always appreciate it, and it's good to hear from you, Art.
Thanks. State Representative Matthew Bierlein, 97th District. We thank him for joining us today. We thank you for listening. We'll be back in a moment to tell you what's ahead.
Fire